Alright guys, I need to get this off my chest because what happened to me at Sunset Motors still makes my blood boil 6 months later. This is going to be long, but trust me, the ending is worth it. So I'm Kevin, 28 years old, work in IT support, and last year I finally saved up enough to buy my first brand new car. Not used, not certified pre-owned, but straight off the lot new. I'd been driving my dad's old 2010 Corolla since college and was ready to treat myself to something nice. I walked into Sunset Motors on a Saturday morning in March with my girlfriend Sarah. The place looked legit, big showroom, fancy lighting, salespeople in suits. We were greeted by this guy Derek who seemed friendly enough at first. Young guy, probably mid-20s, had that eager salesman energy but not too pushy. Derek showed us around and I fell in love with this 2023 Honda Accord. Silver, leather seats, all the tech features I wanted. The sticker price was $28,500, which was exactly at the top of my budget. Derek started talking numbers and said he could work with me on financing. Here's where things get sketchy. Derek disappears for like 20 minutes to talk to his manager about getting me a better deal. Comes back all excited saying they can do $26,000 out the door with a special promotion they're running. I'm thinking this is too good to be true, but Sarah's encouraging me to go for it since we've been looking for months. Derek hands me this stack of paperwork to sign. I'm trying to read through it all, but there's like 15 different forms and he's rushing me, saying the promotion expires at the end of the day and another customer was interested in the same car. Classic pressure tactics, but I was young and stupid. I signed everything, put down my $3,000 down payment, and drove off feeling like I'd gotten the deal of a lifetime. Sarah and I went to dinner to celebrate, and I was posting pictures of my new car on social media like an idiot. Little did I know I'd just gotten completely screwed over. The first red flag came 2 weeks later when I got a call from Derek saying there was a problem with my financing, and I needed to come back to the dealership immediately. My stomach dropped because I'd already been driving the car and showing it off to everyone. When I got to the dealership, Derek had this sheepish look on his face that immediately told me something was wrong. He led me to this cramped office where his manager, this older guy named Frank with a cheap suit and gold chain, was waiting with more paperwork. "Kevin, we've got a situation," Frank says. "The bank rejected your loan application. Your credit score came back lower than we expected, so we need to restructure the deal." I'm sitting there confused because I checked my credit score before shopping and it was 720, which is pretty good. Frank slides this new contract across the desk. The monthly payment had jumped from $380 to $520, and the interest rate went from 4.2% to 11.8%. I'm looking at these numbers thinking there's no way this is legal. But Derek said the deal was approved. I protested. "That was a conditional approval," Frank explains, like I'm an idiot. "We let you take the car in good faith, but now we need the real numbers." He's acting like he's doing me a favor by even letting me keep the car at all. I asked to see the original paperwork I signed, and Derek starts shuffling through files saying he needs to find the right documents. Red flag number 2. I specifically remembered signing a purchase agreement with the lower payment amount. Sarah was texting me asking what was taking so long, and I was getting more frustrated by the minute. Frank keeps pressuring me to sign the new contract, saying I could lose the car if I don't agree to the new terms today. "We've got other customers who would take this deal in a heartbeat," he says. I felt trapped. I'd already been driving the car for 2 weeks, told everyone about my new purchase, and honestly didn't want to lose face by giving it back. So like an idiot, I signed the new paperwork with the higher payment. Biggest mistake of my life. But it gets worse. 3 months into making these ridiculous $520 payments, I get my insurance renewal and they tell me my car is listed as a 2022 model, not 2023. I call the dealership and Derek, who barely remembers me now, says, "Oh yeah, we had to substitute a similar vehicle. Should be in your paperwork." I go digging through all my documents, and buried in the fine print of page 12 of some addendum I never properly read, there's a clause about vehicle substitution that basically gives them permission to bait and switch me with a different car entirely. I was furious when I discovered they'd sold me a 2022 model while advertising and showing me the 2023. The difference wasn't just cosmetic. The 2022 had fewer features, an older infotainment system, and was worth about $2,000 less than what I was paying for. I called Derek probably 15 times over the next week. Half the time he wasn't available, and when I did reach him, he kept giving me the runaround. "Let me check with Frank and get back to you," became his favorite phrase. Of course, he never called back. Finally, I showed up at the dealership unannounced on a Saturday morning, the same day of the week I'd made my original purchase. Derek looked like he'd seen a ghost when I walked in. I demanded to speak with Frank immediately. Frank came out acting all friendly like we were old buddies. "Kevin. How's the car treating you?" he asks with this fake smile. I explained the issue with the model year discrepancy and showed him the insurance documents proving what I was saying. "Well, the 2022 and 2023 are basically identical," Frank says, waving his hand dismissively. "You're getting the same great vehicle, just manufactured a few months earlier. It's actually better because it's had more time for quality control." I couldn't believe the balls on this guy. He's trying to convince me that paying 2023 prices for a 2022 car is somehow a benefit to me. I asked for a partial refund to cover the difference in value, and Frank just laughed. "That's not how car sales work, son." That's when I knew I needed to take action. I'd been scammed, plain and simple, and these guys thought I was just going to roll over and take it. I spent the next 2 weeks researching consumer protection laws, dealership regulations, and documenting every interaction I'd had with Sunset Motors. I also reached out to other customers who'd bought cars there recently. Found 3 people on social media who'd had similar experiences: high-pressure tactics, loan terms changed after signing, vehicles different from what was promised. We started comparing notes. One guy, Michael, had bought a truck there and discovered 2 months later that it had been in an accident before he purchased it. The dealership never disclosed this despite being legally required to. Another woman, Lisa, was promised certain warranty coverage that mysteriously disappeared from her final contract. Armed with evidence of a clear pattern of deceptive practices, I decided to file complaints with every relevant agency I could find. Started with the Better Business Bureau, then moved on to the State Attorney General's Office, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I also discovered that Sunset Motors was licensed by the State Dealer Board, which has strict rules about honest advertising and contract terms. I filed a formal complaint there too, attaching copies of all my documentation including the original advertisements, contracts, and records of my conversations with Derek and Frank. The most satisfying part was writing detailed reviews on every platform I could find: Google, Yelp, Facebook, automotive websites. I laid out exactly what happened, included photos of the contracts, and warned other potential customers about their tactics. Other victims started adding their own stories in the comments. Within 2 weeks, Sunset Motors went from having mostly positive reviews to being flooded with 1-star ratings and detailed accounts of their scammy behavior. Their Google rating dropped from 4.2 stars to 2.1 stars. Frank actually called me personally, furious about the reviews. "You need to remove those lies immediately," he demanded. "We'll sue you for defamation if you don't." I just laughed and told him everything I wrote was true and I had documentation to prove it. "Sue me then, Frank. I'd love to present all this evidence in court." But the real victory came when the State Dealer Board launched an investigation. Turns out they've been getting multiple complaints about Sunset Motors over the past year, and my detailed documentation was the final straw that triggered an official review. A state investigator named Jennifer contacted me and asked for copies of all my paperwork. She explained that if they found violations, the dealership could face fines, license suspension, or even permanent closure. She also mentioned that victims might be entitled to restitution. Meanwhile, my online campaign was gaining momentum. Other customers were coming forward with their stories, and a local news station reached out asking if I'd be willing to do an interview about deceptive dealership practices. I jumped at the chance. The news story aired on a Tuesday evening during the 6 o'clock broadcast. They interviewed me, Michael, and Lisa, and showed footage of the dealership while explaining the various scams we'd uncovered. The reporter had tried to get a statement from Frank, but he refused to come on camera. The news story was the beginning of the end for Sunset Motors. The next day, their phone was ringing constantly with angry customers, and their social media was getting hammered with comments from people sharing their own bad experiences there. I got a call from Derek 2 days after the story aired. He sounded panicked and desperate. "Kevin, man, we need to work something out. This is getting out of hand." He offered to reduce my monthly payment by $50 if I'd agree to remove my reviews and stop talking to the media. $50? After they'd overcharged me by thousands. I told Derek exactly where he could stick his insulting offer. "You had your chance to make this right months ago," I said. "Now you get to deal with the consequences of ripping people off." The state investigation was moving forward, and Jennifer kept me updated on their progress. They'd found evidence of multiple violations: false advertising, contract manipulation, failure to disclose vehicle history, and improper financing practices. The dealership was looking at serious penalties. But the most satisfying development came when I got a call from a lawyer named David Chen who specialized in automotive fraud cases. He'd seen the news story and reviewed the online complaints, and he wanted to discuss a class action lawsuit against Sunset Motors. "Based on what I'm seeing, you and the other victims have a strong case for damages," David explained. "These guys have been systematically defrauding customers for months, maybe years. We can go after them for the money you lost plus punitive damages." I immediately said yes and helped David contact Michael, Lisa, and several other victims who'd come forward after the news story. Within 2 weeks, we had 12 people ready to join the lawsuit, representing over $80,000 in damages from various scams and overcharges. The lawsuit filing made local news again, and this time Frank agreed to be interviewed. Big mistake. He came across as arrogant and defensive, claiming all his customers were lying and trying to get free money. He actually said on camera that people need to read the fine print and understand how business works. His attitude in that interview probably cost him more customers than anything else. Who wants to buy a car from someone who openly admits he buries important information in fine print and treats customers like idiots? Within a month of the lawsuit being filed, Sunset Motors was struggling to stay open. Their inventory was sitting unsold, their reputation was destroyed, and they were facing legal action from multiple directions. 3 months after filing the lawsuit, David called with incredible news. Sunset Motors wanted to settle out of court. They were facing multiple investigations, their business was tanking, and Frank's lawyers had advised him to cut his losses before things got even worse. The settlement offer was generous: full refunds for everyone who'd been overcharged, plus additional compensation for our time and aggravation. In my case, they agreed to pay off my entire car loan and let me keep the vehicle, plus $5,000 in damages. Michael got his truck accident damage covered plus compensation, and Lisa got her warranty issues resolved with cash on top. But I wasn't ready to let them off the hook that easily. I told David I wanted accountability, not just money. These guys need to face real consequences or they'll just move somewhere else and start scamming new victims. David negotiated additional terms requiring Frank to admit wrongdoing in writing, implement new training procedures for sales staff, and submit to regular state audits for 2 years. They also had to post signs in their showroom explaining customers' rights and providing contact information for complaint agencies. The best part was a clause requiring them to personally contact every customer from the past 2 years to offer refunds for any questionable charges. Frank had to spend weeks calling people and essentially admitting he'd been ripping them off. Meanwhile, the state dealer board had completed their investigation and imposed their own penalties. Sunset Motors was fined $75,000 and had their license suspended for 60 days. Frank personally was banned from managing any dealership for 1 year and had to complete mandatory ethics training. The day the settlement was finalized, I drove to Sunset Motors to watch Frank sign the paperwork. He looked miserable sitting there with his lawyers, signing documents that basically admitted he'd been running a fraudulent operation. Derek was nowhere to be seen, apparently he'd quit weeks earlier. Jennifer from the state board was there too, explaining the new compliance requirements Frank would have to follow. He kept nodding and saying, "Yes ma'am," like a scolded child. The arrogant, dismissive attitude from our first meeting was completely gone. As I was leaving, Frank actually approached me in the parking lot. "I hope you're satisfied," he said bitterly. "You've destroyed my business over a misunderstanding." I just smiled and told him he'd destroyed his own business by being dishonest and greedy. 6 months later, Sunset Motors is barely hanging on. Their online reviews are still terrible, their sales have plummeted, and word has gotten around the community about their shady practices. Derek ended up getting a job at a different dealership across town, hopefully having learned his lesson about honest sales practices. Frank tried to rebrand the business as Premier Auto Sales, but everyone knew it was the same operation under a new name. The local news did a follow-up story about the name change, making sure people understood it was still the same problematic dealership. My car loan was paid off completely as part of the settlement, so I now own my 2022 Honda Accord free and clear. It's not the 2023 I originally wanted, but it runs great and serves as a daily reminder that standing up for yourself actually works sometimes. The class action lawsuit helped 12 families get justice and recovered over $150,000 in fraudulent charges and damages. More importantly, it sent a message to other dishonest dealerships in the area that customers aren't as helpless as they think. I've become something of a local advocate for consumer rights. People reach out to me on social media when they're having issues with car dealers, contractors, or other businesses trying to take advantage of them. I always share my story and encourage them to document everything and fight back. The experience taught me that most scammers rely on their victims being too embarrassed, confused, or intimidated to fight back. They count on people just accepting bad treatment and moving on. But when you stand up for yourself and use the tools available, government agencies, social media, legal action, you can actually win. Frank's dealership is still technically open, but they're operating under constant scrutiny. Every few months I drive by just to see if they're still there. Last time I went past, there were maybe 3 cars on the lot and no customers in sight. The best revenge wasn't getting my money back or even seeing Frank humiliated. It was knowing that their predatory business model was exposed and shut down before they could victimize more people. Sometimes justice actually does win in the end. Would I do it all again? Absolutely. It took months of my time and caused a lot of stress, but holding these criminals accountable was worth every minute. Plus, I got a free car out of it and helped a dozen other people get justice too. If you're ever in a situation like this, don't just walk away and accept being ripped off. Document everything, file complaints, leave honest reviews, and find others who've had similar experiences. You have more power than you think you do.